In a bad ACC, are the Canes still a lock for the Coastal? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, looking at Miami football. Actually, we've looked at a few key teams that picked up key victories over the weekend, meaning Notre Dame at Virginia Tech, getting the Irish to 6-0 and projected their playoff possibilities. The same with Texas after the opening loss to Maryland. Texas has defeated, of course, TCU and USC, and now the big win over Oklahoma at the Cotton Bowl. Okay, now for Miami, with Clemson being the gold standard in the ACC, and probably never has there been a time during this Clemson run that they've had the significant advantage over the rest of the ACC that they have right now, with Florida State being down and Miami possibly not being necessarily a lock in the Coastal following a 28-27 win over Florida State. So Miami fans, I ask you this: good win or bad win? Please like, comment, and subscribe to Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football. We discuss, debate, and analyze the game like no one else, and we will do it with the Canes. 5-1, so that's 6 games down, 6 to play. 2-0 in the ACC. And again, glass half full or half empty. We've got a big loss to LSU in the season opener. Just rubbish in that game, 33-3 in the third quarter before losing by 16. But that's been 6 weeks ago. Is this a different football team with a different quarterback in play, of course, in N'Kosi Perry? But they haven't beaten anyone. Their best win might be Toledo, a 25-point win in which they had a one-score lead most of the second half before pulling away. Or is it against Florida State, because the Seminoles do have the best talent that they've faced? All right, and look at the glass half full. 27-7 down, regardless of the opponent, is a big deficit to make up, and they made up for it in a hurry. They got a couple touchdowns in about 45 seconds with the long touchdown pass and the turnover and the next touchdown pass to get back at 27-21. They even scored the game-winning touchdown with a whole lot of time left, and their defense was dominant in this game. Let's start right there. The defense only really gave up one drive for a touchdown. Despite giving up 27 points, it was a dominant defensive performance, especially in today's standard of college football. 8 plays for 58 yards for Florida State. That was the one touchdown drive. Other than that, to close out the game in the last 9 possessions to take over the game, as Florida State only mounted 200 yards of total offense in this game, they had an end of half in which Florida State had the ball with enough plays and enough time to do something with it, and Miami shut them down to end the first half. Then Florida State went punt, fumble, interception, punt, missed field goal, and that wasn't necessarily really a drive to get to the field goal attempt. They drove it 27 yards. Fumble, punt, punt. So with the game on the line, Miami closed them down. DeAndre Francois didn't have a chance, and of course, he simply did not have a chance. It wasn't necessarily on him. The Miami defensive front just collapsed the Florida State pocket over and over and over. The defense was great. Joe Jackson, in particular, Jonathan Garvin. Of course, Michael Pinckney had the key interception in which Francois just completely missed him in traffic, underthrew the ball, and just threw the little dump-off screen pass right to Pinckney. All right, let's look at the offense under N'Kosi Perry. Finally lit it up when they needed to in the fourth quarter. 13 of 32 doesn't look good, but there were some drop passes, and maybe he was nervous. Only his second start and his first huge start on the big stage against Florida State on national television. 204 yards passing. That means he was striking for big plays. So let's not get completely caught up in completion percentage. Sure, the best quarterbacks in the country, well, now they're throwing for 70 and 75%, but a good quarterback typically throws around 65% completion percentage. You can get away with more like 56 or 57% if you're hitting for big plays and you get the defensive support that Perry has with the Miami defense. But he hit on big plays. He completed the fourth down play that was a key pass in the comeback. Quick strikes off the turnovers to complete touchdown passes. 4 touchdowns on 13 completions is pretty remarkable, with no turnovers in 32 passes and many more dropbacks. Jeff Thomas, of course, making big plays. Brevin Jordan as well. The run game not necessarily effective against Florida State. Travis Homer, 70 yards on 21 carries. DJ Dallas has been running like a tank until he faced Florida State with 10 carries for 31 yards. Maybe he should have gotten the ball more to get him rolling. All right, again, it didn't have to be a monumental, furious comeback because they had plenty of time. It was a dire situation, 27-7. You don't want to be down by 20 points. The odds of winning at that point are 5 or 10%, but they still had plenty of time, so they could have run the football more with DJ Dallas. All right, coming down the home stretch for Miami in a weak Coastal Division. So we expected preseason Miami 10 or 11 wins, Virginia Tech 8 wins roughly, and then everybody else fighting for position to possibly play with the other two teams. But now we've got Virginia Tech coming out of the gate with a win against Florida State where they looked really impressive. Well, Florida State's not that good, so what does that mean? Virginia Tech makes it through a couple of lightweights, and then they hit Old Dominion, and all hell breaks loose. They lose by 2 touchdowns to ODU on the road. But then they come back and they beat Duke, and they look very impressive. But then the gut check and the reality check against Notre Dame at home, but the Irish might be just that good. I still think that Miami's the class of the division, without a doubt. The best talented, most talented roster, the best players across the board. Weak link is offensive line, inexperience at quarterback. Virginia Tech, I think, is clearly the second best team. They just showed that in going to Duke and winning by 3 scores against a Duke team that was probably considered the second or third best team in the division. Really, nobody else is a threat overall, but on a given Saturday, Virginia can jump up. Certainly Georgia Tech can. Pitt has shown us against a Syracuse that they can win in overtime, but lose to North Carolina as well. So here's the home stretch for Miami. They're better than everyone by far, but who can predict one particular game? And Virginia Tech has yet to, despite the 2 losses, they have not lost in the ACC. So if Virginia Tech, let's say they stumble once, but they get Miami at home in Blacksburg. And if they win that game head-to-head, then they win the division. For the Canes, it's at Virginia this week in Charlottesville. So that could be a bit of a letdown. And Virginia's coming off a bye to prep for Miami. BC on a Friday night on the road. That's the tricky one that I looked at preseason and thought, okay, Miami's going to go 10-2. This is their second loss. At BC on a Friday night. Then they come home for Duke. They've got Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech on the road. Of course, the one against the Hokies, again, will play heavily into the division championship race and may just flat out decide it. And then they come back for Pitt, and we know what happened last year at Pittsburgh on the final weekend of the season. Pitt shouldn't sneak up on Miami this year, although we've seen Texas lose to Maryland 2 consecutive years. So it does happen. And Clemson almost lost to Syracuse 2 consecutive years as well. So I'll give them, the Canes, a 85% chance of winning. At Virginia, we'll go BC. That's only about a 65% win on the road on a Friday night against a good team, a solid team. They just lost to North Carolina State by 5 points on the road. Duke at home's a good 80% certainty of a win. Georgia Tech on the road, somewhere in that 80% range as well. Virginia Tech on the road, I'm calling that in the Canes' favor at 55 to 60%. Pitt, that's an 80 to 85% play at home, maybe even higher than that. That's my take on Miami football. I'm going to stick with my preseason prediction. So they've got 1 loss now. I took Miami at 10-2 to win the Coastal Division, at 6-2 over Virginia Tech's 5-3. We'll stick with that because it's still in sight. Would love to hear what you have to say. Leave your comments down in the comments section on Miami football, your prediction on the Canes, and the thought of Miami and a rematch in the ACC championship game against Clemson. Let's talk it up right here at Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football.